This is a miter saw. This particular one is made by the DeWalt company. It is a DWS709 is the model number, and that can be found right up on top. There's always the manufacturer's label on them, and it also will have the model number. It'll tell you the amps and the voltage of the motor. It'll also have a serial number. Word of advice is always write your serial numbers down, so when you get tools stolen, you'll know which one's yours at the pawn shop when you go to reclaim it. This type of miter saw is called a compound miter saw. It will do miter cuts and it will lay over and do bevel cuts, hence the name compound. Introduce you to some of the parts. The rail lock, because this is a sliding saw, is back here. It's a little screw. You loosen it, and the motor will slide forwards and back. We generally operate it in the back position. There's a lockdown pin right under the motor over here, and all it does is hold the head down. Release the tension and a little bit of spring, pull it out, it allows it to slide up. You get ready to lock it down to travel, pull it down, push the pin in, and it's ready to go. You have a handle, you have a trigger. The motor is in the back, so there's a pulley that runs here that actually turns the blade. This is the little locking pin that you use when you get ready to change the blade out. You've got the power coming to the wire. Down here is a portion that catches sawdust and vents it out the back. You have the table area of the saw. You have the fence area of the saw, and this fence is in two parts. It has a fixed part on the lower and has a movable part to the upper, which has a retaining screw on the back side. You just loosen it, slide it where you want it, and lock it down. Both sides will move. This one's also equipped with a locking rest that you can ring around and lock a piece of wood in place so that you can make repetitive cuts. This in the front is called the miter latch, and that's the miter locking knob. So when you look at the miter scale through here, it has lots of little measurements. It has some little notches in it that are called detents that'll automatically pop into the zero. The next one over is about 15 degrees. So one of the first things I do is I come in and pop it to what I know to be zero. This locking knob is if you want to keep it from sliding around or moving any. There is the miter pointer here. It has a little screw that holds it. It will move around a little bit. So one of the first things I do is lock it to zero, make sure my miter pointer is as accurate as I can on zero, so I know where I'm at. If you have to do an angle that's not in a detent, say 10 degrees, I bring it to 10 degrees, and then I use the knob here to lock it in place where it won't move. We have a regular upper guard and a lower guard that's fixed. The upper guard is fixed and the lower guard moves and retracts, so that as this arm here, as you come down, it actually pushes the guard open. Here in the table we have a kerf plate that allows, as you make the cut through the wood, it actually passes completely through the wood and into a little trough that's right there, and actually helps to feed the sawdust out the back. If you look on the inside here, there's a miter gauge indicator. Like I said, this was a compound saw. There's a release on the back side, a little spinning release that allows you to lean the motor over so that you can set a miter and a bevel at the same time and slide through, making a compound cut. This saw will actually pivot and lay over in both directions. To change the blade on this saw, the tool is located around back off the right side. It has a little slot. It has a hex head and it has a Torx head. To work with this one, you've got to work to get this guard up out of your way, because if you notice right here, there's the nut that releases the blade, and it's up under this spring that holds the lower blade guard. So you take the Torx head and just loosen this top screw that's holding on the lower blade guard. Spin the blade guard up out of your way, this underscrew, and you need to loosen it, but do not take it out. Loosen it out most of the way. If you keep wiggling it, it'll work its way up to where you can move the lower blade guard on up out of the way of that nut and then ease it back, and it will rest on the screw and hold it up out of the way. While pushing the detent around the other side, I'm going to use the nut driver to turn it till it locks. This, like the worm drive saw, is also reverse thread, which means you have to turn it to the right to loosen it. Remove the nut and the washer. Give it a little wiggle. It all comes out. The blade goes in, teeth facing you. You notice on most of these blades, they usually have arrows on them to tell you which way they go. On these washers, you will see that they have an oblong side. They only go in one way. Keeps it locked in place and keeps it from spinning. To tighten it, you actually have to turn this one to the left. Finger tighten it in, and then I'll use the wrench to snug it down. Now, I'll hold the lower blade guard up out of the way, wiggle it back down into place where it's behind, the guard is behind that set screw. Tighten the screw in place. Let the lower blade guard, the back screw, we tighten it in place. And that completes the blade process, except for putting the tool back on the backside where it goes. This is the miter saw. So what I want to see from you is to point out all the little pieces, where everything works, where everything goes. I want to see you take the blade off, put the blade back on, and put it back into the lock position. Take that video and upload it to Google Classroom.